Hey, what's up? This is the Leafs Convo for Oak Ridge Ford in London, Ontario. OakRidgeFord.com. Ask me about the 2021 Ford Bronco. You can order one right now. I can get it done for you. Norm in London, Mike in Buffalo. The Leafs coming off a win over the Habs, 3 straight now, tops in the entire NHL. Most goals in the league, tied with the Edmonton Oilers. Things are going really, really well, Mike. But of course, there's a bit of controversy in regards to William Nylander being benched for the better part of the third period against the Habs. Where do you want to begin, man?
Yeah, let's talk about the good, and then we'll talk about the bad and the ugly. Beating the Habs, I think rather decisively, except for that 33 seconds in the second period, was. I mean, it's the Habs are the best, or maybe the second best team in the North Division, other than the Leafs, and to beat them 3 or 4 times, which they have so far, is a testament to how well the Leafs are playing. But the only thing that I'm concerned about, and it sort of bled into their play this week, is obviously, and we did the podcast after the collapse against Ottawa, is that that sort of stretch that the Leafs had many times last year, where it's just I call it a brain cramp, where all of a sudden they get vapor lock, and all of a sudden they give up 2, 3 goals, 4 goals in a span, and they don't know what they're doing. And last night, they take a 2-0 lead on 2 power play goals. Austin Matthews with this unbelievable hammer of God one-timer that he had, and then Travis Boyd with the power play goal, and they basically give it away in a span of 33 seconds. And they recovered, and they played a solid rest of the game, played well defensively in the third period, holding a lead. But it's always those brain cramps that really just stagger, I think, a lot of Leaf fans and puzzle me, because a team that can play as well as they do shouldn't have these areas where they just don't know what they're doing.
The Leafs a 5-3 winner over Les Rats in Montreal. Austin Matthews, another 4-point game. He's on a 16-game point streak, 18 goals, leads the NHL. Is he going to get 50 and 56? It's possible. Mike, how do you mitigate this malaise, right? They score a couple, and then they give a couple back, maybe even more in a short time frame. How do you prevent that?
Well, that's really the question, because if they can eliminate that, if they can, just excise it from their game, then they're legitimately a Stanley Cup contender.
Sure.
They may be that right now, but I think that there are still flaws with this team that need to be hammered out before the playoffs start. But I brought up to you before the show. It's like right now, Marner and Matthews next to Draisaitl and McDavid, and sometimes they split those guys up and put them on separate lines. So you can't say that they're a combo all the time. But Marner and Matthews are the best duo in the league. But the issue is, and we've seen this many a time, is can you win being essentially a one-line team? Tavares is not having a terrible year. He's almost at a point per game, but he's got, I believe, 6 goals, and only 2 of them are 5-on-5. So he's been mostly a power play creation. And as you mentioned, Nylander gets benched yesterday after in the final 9 minutes of regulation, as the Leafs are up 2 goals. And you see, he scores 2 goals on opening night, and that doesn't score in 7 games. Then he scores like 5 points in 3 games, and then goes pointless in 6. You just, for a guy who is making the money that he's making and playing on the second line on a team that that needs a second line to produce, right now that combo is not producing. And the question is whether Sheldon Keefe will split up the dynamic duo and put Marner with Tavares to get him going. And Nylander has always played well with Matthews, but you just don't want to mess the chemistry that's going on right now, because right now Marner is probably going to be 1, 2, or 3 in the league in points. And Matthews has a chance. I don't think he's going to get 50 in 56 games, but he's going to push it. And the way he's going right now, he's just unstoppable.
Yeah, the Leafs want to see their players reach, then conquer these milestones personally. But it all comes back to the team and how it's doing. The Leafs should finish first in this Canadian division, regardless of how you configure the lines. I'm of the mindset that it will be Marner and Matthews ultimately, and that
Mm-hmm.
these two, if together for a long period of time, where success is continual, could become infamous, could become notorious as one of the greatest contemporary duos in the game, and maybe historically too. However, the Leafs have enough firepower and should have enough confidence in the group to at least temporarily make some adjustments. And if that means Marner and Tavares getting back together and 16 straightening 91 out and 34 doing the same thing for 88, then you do it. You shouldn't be afraid to see what happens there. Again, this team has so much talent from top to bottom. Any
Mm-hmm.
configuration should be able to produce points on a nightly basis. And to think you're beating the shit out of these Canadian teams night in and night out. Mercifully, we're almost halfway through this 56 game stretch, and I don't know if I can endure another one of these 7-team league type things. But the Leafs should be able to make some adjustments, do a little experimentation with the idea that in the end, when push comes to shove and it's all on the line, Marner and Matthews will be that dynamic duo up top,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody else following suit.
Well, the interesting thing about what Keefe did on Saturday, Hyman comes back into the lineup after missing a game, after blocking a shot, and everybody assumed he was going to go on the left side with Tavares and Nylander because, he goes in the corners, digs out the puck, gets it to the more talented offensive players. That's what he does with Matthews and Marner. Instead, and I liked what Keefe did, he put Hyman in the role that he wanted at the very beginning of the season, which is on the third line with Ilya Mikheyev and Pierre Engvall. And that line was really good. Engvall, I think he probably had one of his best games of the season. He's played well the last few games, getting regular playing time, playing big, I think, as Keefe wants him to. And Mikheyev is flying all over the place. He had an unbelievable chance that Price robbed him on. But they played.
But it's freeing, Mike. Look how free these guys play, knowing that they don't have to score, but they have the capability to score. And if they do, it's a bonus. Their job is to, be that binding agent between shifts and, obviously show the opponent a different dynamic. A little bit rough and tumble, some speed, some energy, in your face, youth, enthusiasm.
By putting Hyman on that third line, it freed up Keefe to experiment with Kerfoot on the wing with Tavares and Nylander, and that did work and didn't work. I mean, it worked in terms of Kerfoot getting the goal in the third period, but that was with Spezza on the ice instead of Nylander. I think he won the faceoff, and then they went back down on a 2-on-1, and Spezza made an unbelievable play. But that sort of puts into focus what the chatter is, and we have to remember, we're almost at the end of February, that the trade deadline will be, I think it's April 12th. And with this team where they are, Kyle Dubas is going, and the potential of them, being a legitimate Stanley Cup contender, Kyle Dubas is going to try to add one or two pieces that can help before the deadline. Depth is the key in any playoff race, in any playoff competition, and this year even more so with a compacted schedule. So the talk the last couple of weeks has been rumors about Michael Granlund from Nashville, that he apparently was the player that Elliot Friedman was sort of hinting about in terms of the Leafs being interested in. Apparently the Leafs tried to get him in the offseason, as they searched for inexpensive veteran free agents. They talked to Granlund, they talked to Connor Sheary, they talked to Vladislav Nemestikov, and obviously they signed Simmons and VC and Thornton. Nashville is probably going to start selling in the next few weeks, and Granlund is somebody that apparently that the Leafs coveted in the past and may covet depending on the price. I don't like the fit of Granlund because he was really good in Minnesota. He has not been good the last few years in Nashville. He makes $3.75 million, so Nashville is going to have to
What does
retain
he
probably
bring
half.
that the Leafs need
Right,
and don't have?
exactly, exactly, and that's the question. I mean, okay, he fits in on the left side, and they think as a good possession player that he would fit well with Tavares and Nylander. I really, honestly, I mean, I would rather have Wayne Simmons on the second line, but maybe they don't think he can
Mm-hmm.
play those kind of minutes. But honestly, if they're going to go out and try to get a top six forward, I want them to get a top six forward that has size and crash and bang and
Yeah.
can bring some physicality. Now, those guys don't grow on trees. We're talking about Nylander and him getting benched,
Mm-hmm.
and he was an eighth overall pick in the 2014 draft. Two players from that draft, who are both 24 years old, are both in a situation with their teams where they're getting sort of hit on the nose with a rolled up newspaper because they're not playing well. Sam Bennett in Calgary and Jake Virtanen in Vancouver. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not saying the Leafs are interested in either one. I think they would be interested in Bennett if they could get him at a reasonable price. But it's something about players at that particular age as they're getting paid that they want to play their way, and their way doesn't work. And
Mm-hmm.
in all these situations, eventually, where I'm going. I think Nylander is not going to be a Leaf next year. I've been saying that the last couple of years, but right now they have to make do with what they have. And if Kyle Dubas can find somebody before the deadline that can help this team go forward, he probably will make that deal.
This is the Leafs Convo for Oak Ridge Ford in London, Ontario. OakRidgeFord.com. Norm with Mike. It's disappointing to see Nylander benched. One of the top 5 guys. He's been in the league since 14. He's always only 24. Well, how old's Connor McDavid and these guys, right?
Mm.
Now you're entering your prime now. How the hell are you getting benched? Like, how are you getting benched? Why are you getting benched? It's
Because
frustrating. And then everyone will say, well, he's elite and he's got all the skill. Of course. Why are you getting benched? Why are you
he's
benched? I know why, but to those who talk about, Nylander as if, he really is the straw that stirs the drink for this team, and he's unfairly treated. Why is he getting benched when he's been in the league this long? He's maybe the third best player on the team, fourth best player. Why are you being benched in a game where your team is up considerably, and this should be easy, right?
you could make the case that William Nylander, in terms of pure talent, is the second most talented player on the Leafs next to Austin Matthews. The problem is, and the problem that has been throughout his career,
We're always
is
qualifying our description of William Nylander. There's okay, hold on now. Here's what I think, but why? It's kid
well,
gloves with Nylander and no one else.
well, because and I compare him to somebody like Alexei Kovalev, who was incredibly talented. But the problem was you saw that talent 10 games a year, and the other 72, he was a disappearing act.
Ooh,
And
L'artiste.
that's what I think at times, and maybe that was the reason why Keefe benched him, because he wasn't getting what he wanted out of him. And he even said after the game, it's not injury. So it's the way he's playing. When he's on, he's phenomenal. Like opening night, like the 3-assist game when Spezza scored the hat trick. Problem is, he's not on every night. Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner have been on almost every night. John Tavares puts in an effort every night. It doesn't turn out, to be a dominating effort every time, but their motor is there. William Nylander has got all this talent, but he does not have the motor of a superstar player. And at a certain point, the Leafs are going to just get fed up and say, we've got to move on from this.
He does not like physical hockey. That is clear. Sure, he scores down low. He's good positionally when there's something at stake offensively for him, but defensively, I mean, he's pretty contained unto what himself and where he thinks he needs to play. We've seen him let players slide by. He just does not want to get involved in physical contact. He'll never mix it up on behalf of his teammates. That's his style of play, and he's really good at it. But I don't think it's enough to warrant the attention that he gets from his Nylanderites, or whatever they call them, those who are indoctrinated into his cult, and conversely, those who hate his guts. Goes back to, he is a complimentary player. Is he a frontline guy? I don't think so. He does not play fully to be that kind of guy. And after all this time, he won't develop into that. But what he gives you should be good enough. Unfortunately, his effort is just not good enough on every single night. And we saw that in Montreal. That was really unfortunate. Now, John Tavares is struggling as well, and we may see these lines get shaken up a little bit to try to get 88 going, to try to get 91 going. Does Matthews? Because I'll see comments. Well, if Nylander could just play with Matthews, and Marner can go to the second line as if he's a second liner, go play with Tavares. Well, maybe Tavares and Marner should be on the first line, and it should be Matthews and Nylander number 2, if this is the way we're breaking them up. Do you think Matthews wants to play with Nylander? Do you think, again, and not to shit on Nylander more, we like, okay, Nylander fans, we like Nylander. We just think he should be better. This is nonsense, getting benched.
We like Nylander. We just want to see the A game of Nylander more than we.
It'll never happen. So,
right.
So now that he isn't playing to the capability that everybody thinks he can, and we don't hear much about his comparison to Marner, because it all comes down to contracts and who's better. That debate was never a debate, but it was because Nylander was hot, and his fan base, likes to pit him versus everyone else, and then they don't necessarily like to hear the shit that he gets, even though they essentially started this issue, right? It's the fans of one player talking him up over everyone else, and then when he's down, they don't like the fact that he's getting the attention. So we're kind of we're lending into that now. But again, the Leafs are really good, and Nylander got benched. So what else the hell are we going to talk about? But do you think Matthews wants to play with Nylander consistently? Sorry, Mike.
No, I think he likes playing with Nylander, because Nylander is a good playmaker, and they've played well in the past. But I think right now the dynamic combination of Marner and Matthews, along with Thornton, they love playing with Thornton. So and the ability of Thornton to play on a top line role with limited minutes sometimes stretches out the lineup more, which is, I think, a benefit for them. But I'll just say this, and I know the people listen to this, and when they say, oh, they hate Nylander. Again, I like him, but here's the reality, and nobody's thinking about this right now because everybody's engrossed in the season, and we should watch how the season plays out and how the playoffs play out.
Yep.
At the end of this year, Zach Hyman is an unrestricted free agent. He's making in the mid twos. Frederik Andersen is an unrestricted free agent, and Morgan Riley is 1 year away from unrestricted free agency. The Leafs don't have the cap space to re-sign all 3 of those guys, or maybe even 2 of those guys, unless they move out a big contract. And they're not moving out Tavares, and they're not moving out Marner and Matthews. So maybe they move out Alex Kerfoot eventually, and that's only $3.5 million. The only guy they can move out to clear space to get a young, inexpensive assets back and clear cap space to sign the other guys is William Nylander.
But Mike, there is a belief among Nylander's supporters that he has a deal with Dubas that is ironclad. He will be a Leaf as long as Dubas is the general manager. And then those who dislike Nylander, because he's just such a polarizing figure, and a lot of it's his own fault, and then also the fault of his supporters. But those who dislike him think that Dubas is, down the rabbit hole with Nylander, and his career is dependent upon Nylander doing well or not. I cannot think how, under any circumstance, Dubas would have guaranteed a player like Nylander, who is a complimentary player, the opportunity fully to be a Maple Leaf for as long as he wants to be. That's just effing nonsense.
Well,
No way.
I'll finish it on this. I was in the scrum at Scotiabank Arena after the signing when Dubas was asked that question, and Dubas said, essentially, I'm paraphrasing. Right now we have no intention of trading William Nylander, but there was no like, I'm never trading you. That's horse crap. That's not the case. If it's beneficial to this team, Kyle Dubas will do it. And I think
he has a contract that can be moved out, and if he were to be moved out for even a lesser player, how much of an impact do you think the Leafs would feel if Nylander were not on the team for 10 games? Would we get to the point after Game 5 and say, "Geez, we need 88 back, or we're fucked"? I don't think so.
No, because right now the second line is not producing with him. So what would it be without him? I mean, you need Simmons back. You probably move Hyman up the second line. It affects the depth of the team, but I think it's something that you're going to have to sort of get used to in terms of a reality going forward, that Nylander's not going to be there eventually, and Matthews, Marner, and Tavares are.
He's a polarizing figure, guys. You know that. He got benched in a 5-3 win against the Canadiens. He's been in the league for 6-7 years. It's unacceptable. So we're talking about it. If Nylander goes on a run and kicks ass for the next 10 games, we'll be talking about that too. God bless the guy. A couple of players, Mike, I wanted to bring up. John Tavares, is he rounding second on his career? And again, I'm bringing this up now because he I don't know if he's lost the step. He just doesn't look that great out there. He's not in sync with Nylander, and Nylander's got his issues right now, and it's just one guy who's struggling and another guy who's struggling. They're not going to propel one another forward and figure out a way. That's why we're even discussing the idea of breaking up these lines. But Tavares, and he's been in the league. He was drafted in 2009. Is he losing a step? I mean, should we kind of look at him now and think, well, his best years are behind him?
Well, that's what people thought last year, because he looked sluggish, and then he started this year, and everybody said, "Wow, he looks fantastic." I really think that the whole dynamic with him and Nylander not gelling has affected things, because they put Marner on the line with him late in the third period against Ottawa, and he scored a goal. So I don't think he's round the corner. I think he's still a top flight center in this league. I mean, is perfectly slotted to be a second line center behind Matthews. He needs to score to take some of the heat off of Matthews. But when Team Canada puts together their squad for Beijing next February, I would be surprised if Tavares is not on it.
That's amazing. The squad for Beijing. Oh shit! These teams can't even cross the border right now, and we're Beijing.
Oh, you don't have to tell me. You don't have to tell me, Norm.
Yeah, I know. Jimmy Vesey, what's his deal? Is this guy even worth having on the team?
Well, I actually think in the last few games right now he's a depth guy. He played on the fourth line last night with Boyd and Spezza. I mean, he's been effective as a penalty killer. I mean, I think he's going to be a guy who's in and out of the lineup. I think that they got what they sort of paid for with it was $800,000 or $900,000 a year. I think he's an effective guy. He's just not the guy that everybody thought he was going to be when he came out as the Hobey Baker winner and thought he was going to be a power forward. But he's been an effective player. He's played a role, but I don't think he's going to score a lot of goals.
He's no Fabian Brunstrom
or Miroslav Ináček.
Who else? Tyler Bozak.
St. Louis. He won a cup.
He's like a lot. He's like a lot of ex-Leafs. They leave Toronto and go succeed elsewhere.
Luke Shen, like he did last year.
That's amazing. Leafs Convo poll from 2 days ago. 227 votes. That's a lot of votes for us.
Mm.
Is it worth breaking up Matthews and Marner to ignite Nylander and Tavares? This thing is basically split down the middle. 11% say it's worth it. 40% say, sure, do it temporarily. 35% say no, and then 14% say never, like right down the middle.
Mm-hmm.
There is a belief amongst half the fan base that for the greater good of the team, you split what could be one of the great duos of our time, and they're developing into that. Split them up and help them, or split them up and get them to light a fire under the asses of their teammates, which is an altruistic and a really selfless thing to do. The other half believe that this show, the 34th 16 show, is just so effing good that we just need to keep seeing it. It will carry the Leafs, and the other guys can figure it all out. Mike, we should probably wrap here soon. A few more thoughts, and we'll go.
I mean, well, look at the narrative from that happened before last night's game. Austin Matthews has not scored in 3 games against the Canadiens. He had 3 assists in 3 games. Mitch Marner had only scored 1 goal career against the Canadiens, and the talk was, well, the Canadiens are a really well-rounded defensive team, which they are. They have Carey Price, and they've been matching up Shea Weber and Ben Sherratt against Matthews. Well, that was all shot to hell when Matthews scores 2 goals against them. So the issue here is, and we know in the playoffs, if a team can shut down the other team's big line, they win. And more often than not, it's, that big line is going to produce. But if a team can muscle up against Matthews and Marner and shut them down, then you have to depend on your depth to be able to score the odd goal. And right now, the second line is not doing it. I think that they'll get started, but that's the reason why that 50% said, well, maybe you should split it up, because then you'd have 2 effective lines. That's what Boston does all the time with the Pasternak, Bergeron, and Marchand line. But eventually, they all come back together and play on that line.
Are we getting caught as a fan base in a trap again with this team? All these damn goals, the dominance right now. We're approaching the midway point of this contracted season. Are we getting caught up in this hype, Mike, and we're all going to be sorely disappointed once again when this team can't D it down? And Sheldon Keefe can't get all these guys to buy into the right way of playing. That's 200-foot hockey, all 3 zones, regardless of your offensive talent.
Organically, it happens that the teams play better defensively in the second half. What people see, though, is the top 4 players in the NHL in terms of scoring are all in the North Division. And you've got 2 teams in the North Division in Ottawa and Vancouver that simply can't play defense. So that really, affects things. But I do think that, Winnipeg, Calgary, Montreal, Toronto could all sort of batten down the hatches. I don't think Edmonton can. The only way that they can win is by scoring 7 goals, and that will eventually catch up to them. But I think eventually, probably past, maybe mid to late March, teams will start playing more playoff hockey. And Sheldon Keefe has been successful, at least in the American Hockey League, in getting his teams to play effectively 2-way. So we'll see if he can do that in the NHL.
It's all a rehearsal. And in the meantime, guys like Marner and Matthews are putting on quite the show for us to entertain us, get us excited. But it's a rehearsal for the big show that will begin when the playoffs commence. I'm hoping that Sheldon Keefe can be the maestro, be the guy who keeps everybody in check. I'm sure Matthews will need a kick in the pants at some point. Marner as well. There's a lot at stake in this season, and that's why it's important for players like William Nylander and John Tavares to find their rhythm. And if it takes a mix-up of the lines for the time being to get everybody going, everybody on the same page, then that's fine, because all hands will need to be on deck for when this playoff thing begins. And isn't that going to look interesting? A bunch of players from Canada playing in Canada, taking on these dudes from the United States for the very first time in well over a year. in a short series. I mean, that, it'd be like the American League taking on the National League in the World Series all those years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But you're going to have that coagulation of Canadian and American teams when the playoffs begins. That's going to be fun to watch, and you can imagine just how exciting that's going to be for the players, if not nerve-wracking. Real quick, Calgary Flames. The Flames again. Just more business as usual. What would you like to see from the Leafs in that game that you may have seen against Montreal and in the previous games over the past week that you want to see more of?
Well, I want to see a continuation of that third line with Mikheyev, Engvall, and Hyman. I think it's a dynamic checking line. It's not going to score a lot, but they're all fast. They all have size. They all play with a certain energy and verve. So I want to see that line continue. The one concern, and I still haven't been able to get clarification on it, maybe the Leafs have immediate availability today, is Jake Muzzin took a shot off of his leg in the third period, continued on, but then late in the period,
the Toffoli stick to the face, right?
Yeah, well, I don't know, but all I know is that he left for the dressing room early, and Sheldon Keefe was not asked the question and in the post-game media availability of his status. So this morning, when they have their media availability, I'm sure he'll be asked what's going on with Muzzin, if anything is going on.
Well, it looked like Toffoli caught Muzzin with his stick just before he scored that goal to make it 5-3, right? And there was a little bit of concern on Toffoli's part because he played with Muzzin in Los Angeles. So they're probably buddies, and he probably thought he had done something to him. And clearly something must have happened if Muzzin left the game, and nobody's talking about it. I was going to bring Muzzin up earlier, but it's been all about Nylander and Matthews and Marner. Muzzin's looked really good of late. He's just looked really determined, and obviously health plays into that. Lots of command out there, and geez, when you can have confidence in one, two, or three, or even four of your veteran defensive guys, and know that they're going to be there like stalwarts. We could talk about the prowess of the offense all day long. It's even better to know that your top defensive guys are locked in and buying into what needs to be done.
Muzzin provides a big-bodied presence that this blue line has not had in a while from a top four defenseman. I mean, Riley and Brody have been solid and pretty good, but Hall and Muzzin have been really good as a sort of shutdown pair who play with size. I mean, you saw what Muzzin and Josh Anderson were doing to each other and have done to each other over the 4 games. You know, he elbowed Anderson in the chops yesterday. More than likely, in previous years, Anderson would have just run roughshod over the Leafs, and nobody would basically call him on it. And Muzzin was there to call him on it, and that is something that's invaluable. And I think Zach Bogosian in a depth role, in a bottom pairing role, has done the same thing. He plays with physicality, and that has been something that has been missing from the Leafs defense for years.
Yeah, you shouldn't have to worry about any of your veterans. They should know their roles, know what they need to do, and execute it night in and night out, especially against these bottom feeders like the Sens, like Vancouver, in this tiny temporary division that is the Canadian group. They shouldn't be benched because of a lack of defensive or team accountability. At this point, these guys should know what they need to do, so that when the new guys come in to help bolster or augment the group, there is a sound structure in place. And Mike, we can talk about Michael Granlund going forward. I hope it's not much more than what we've discussed today, because he doesn't seem like the kind of guy the Leafs would need to help bring them closer to full dominance. Just looks like a guy.
Yeah, let's just say this: as we get closer to the deadline, there'll be more teams that are dropping out with more players. So the options in terms of who is available and who Kyle Dubas decides to go after will be plentiful. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I've even heard Eric Stahl's name being mentioned from Buffalo because he's an unrestricted free agent at the end of the year. I mean, would you take Eric Stahl on a third line or as a winger? I think I would.
Yeah, he's veteran presence, has been around, has something that he'd like to accomplish before he hangs up the skates. What we just need to make sure is that this entire team is ready to skate, ready to work, and get the fucking thing done through the first game, through that 16th win to hoist that Stanley Cup. You know, it's nice to have the veteran presence there. It's nice to have guys who have a commitment and a reason to still be in the league. But can they handle it? That's the question. I think the bulk of this group can. It's about augmentation and making sure that the guys who are amongst the leaders and the best players commit to being that night in and night out. And if not, there's the door.